Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring you today's most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. As the global economy continues to grapple with uncertainty, South Korea announced its updated economic policy direction for 2025, signaling major shifts in fiscal strategies. Notably, the government has revised its growth forecast for this year from 2.2% to 1.8%, a figure that trails behind projections by international organizations. This revised outlook reflects the complex challenges the country faces, including slower than expected domestic recovery, a delicate export environment, and shifting geopolitical dynamics. To tackle these challenges, the government has unveiled a broad range of policy measures, including a $12.3 billion economic stimulus package. But with such a comprehensive strategy, one question remains. Will these measures be enough to navigate the turbulence ahead? Today, we unpack the significance of these announcements and pinpoint some relevant economic policies that will take effect from this year. For this, we invite Yang Jun-seok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Welcome, Professor.
Hello.
And also joining us is Song Soo-young, professor of business and economics at Chungang University. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
So let's start with Professor Song. The government has revised its growth forecast for this year from 2.2 to 1.8, like I said, which is lower than projections of the OECD, IMF, and the Bank of Korea. What do you think is driving this revision, and how should we interpret the implications of these changes in policy direction?
Yeah, recently this revision clearly reflects the recent incident that happened in the December 3rd when the martial law has been announced. And even though it has been short-lived, but still we are in some situation that has been like the waging the conflict between the opposition party and the incumbent president Yoon Suk-yeol. So clearly this is we cannot deny the effect of this one. But clearly, according to the most of the projections made by OECD or IMF or even the Bank of Korea, they have made even before December 3rd. So that already reflected the lowering fertility rate and the aging population. That is clearly the obstacles that make the Korean economy grow sluggishly, and we expect a very low growth rate for the upcoming years and for this year also in 2024. The problem is, unless we make this happening as a short-lived and a temporary one, this could settle down as a very permanent effect as a Korea discount. So that is what I'm most concerned. And the revision that was made by the Minister of the Economic Planning, that has reflected this situation. And also, this could make people's and the consumption behavior very conservatively. I mean, they do not spend money, so they are more likely to fall into some liquidity trap. So that makes matters worse. So today's announcement and today's declaration of the economic policy directions that could alleviate the negative effect of the most upcoming happenings, and also recover the consumer confidence, and also make the foreign investors to remain within the Korean market. So that is reflected well, and we are going to see that in details. But primarily, I think this policy is necessary and well aligned with the current situation.
Right, and the government has also announced plans to inject $245 billion this year into trade industry, and revealed tailored support plans for key industries such as semiconductors and also shipbuilding. Professor Yang, do you think this will have a positive impact on the slowdown in exports?
Well, I think it will have a positive effect, but not a very large one. And that's basically because no matter what we do in Korea, we cannot really affect the decisions for demand that takes place outside Korea, which is what export is. Now, policies may help firms get some financing if they run out of liquidity. They may ease some export procedures, which is what we should do anyway. But the plans that were announced today dealt with things like making more industries, assisting more industries to export, giving some extra subsidies to certain strategic industries and so on. But still, that does not fundamentally deal with increasing demand abroad. And also, some of the measures, I'm not sure if it'll be short-term enough to help this year. For example, trying to widen the range of products that Korea exports, that is very good as a policy goal. We should have done it anyway. But the market for Korean exports globally will probably be lower this year, partially because of the Trump effect, partially because of the global economic slowdown that we will still see. So yes, we should be doing some of these policies anyway, and it will be helpful somewhat, but I don't see it as being that big a help. I think we should concentrate more on recovering the domestic economy rather than trying to use exports as an engine of growth, at least for this year.
Right, so focusing more on the core domestic economy is important. Now, South Korea's government has also identified livelihood issues as a top priority, and to restore livelihoods, it introduced a $12.26 billion economic stimulus package and announced plans for various support projects as well. Professor Song, could you highlight for us the key details of this plan?
Yeah, this plan has been well illustrated in some economic policy directions. As I agree with Professor Yang's position, the domestic economy is much more important to recover to regroup and recover the Korean economy in the right track to have some strong domestic consumption and demand, because the outside, the export part is very vulnerable, and it's totally up to the U.S.'s President Trump's mind. So in detail, the livelihood, because livelihood to make the economic policy directions is it comes as the first one, and all our effort to achieve a swift recovery of people's consumption. And particularly, they would like to reduce the specific consumption taxation and offering some subsidy for the purchase of the electric vehicle. Also, because the electric vehicle usually produced to export to United States market, but that might face some obstacles and barriers. Therefore, this is a very well-aligned policy, and also to make people assured of the income or the consumption purchasing power could be reliable, then the government and as well as the Bank of Korea should emphasize, they should put much more emphasis on to make people believe that the current situation will not continue. So that means not only support the livelihood of the vulnerables and the lower income groups, and also provide the subsidies to some export and small and medium enterprises. And also, what is important is lowering interest rate is also very important, because otherwise, so-called there is a caballo effect, which tells us that there's some stagflationary effect of the high interest rate, because of it could affect the working capital, which turns out to be a cost to the small and medium enterprise. So to that regard, what is necessary to assure people this current situation, economic turmoil, turbulence is a very temporary one, and then the Korean economy will return to the right track for the future. Then in order to assure people, convince peoples of the future prospect of the economy, should be the fiscal expansionary policy should be accompanied by the monetary easing policy also.
Right. And with this unstable trade environment and the political impeachment crisis coinciding, the government has also identified the management of international credibility as an urgent priority. Professor Yang, what measures has the government proposed to manage its international credibility, and how effective do you think these measures will be?
Okay, well, in the economic plans, they did announce some plans to subsidize or give support to certain strategic industries, and for recovery of or maintenance of current sovereign credit rating. They are going to push up the economic diplomacy of efforts. It's necessary. It's necessary, but I'm not sure how effective they will be, especially for the sovereign credit rating. And that's because if you look at the sovereign credit rating, what that does, what that's supposed to evaluate is whether the government can pay back the debt that it has incurred and whether they can pay back the interest on that debt on time. And I would say that the damage from the martial law was less than the damage from the current political turmoil. If you talk about martial law, nothing in the real economy was really that much affected. Production, exports, they were not affected. People were not arrested or people were not hurt. So we could have survived the martial law with basically a hiccup in the economy, but we've seen the political turmoil expanding, and it's threatening to paralyze the workings of the government. If we look at, say, 2003, when Fitch downgraded U.S. credit rating, that was because of the internal political conflict in the U.S. Congress, where the Congress refused to raise the U.S. credit ceiling for borrowing. And that created concerns that the U.S. will not pay back its debt because the government will be paralyzed. And a couple of weeks ago, when S&P downgraded French sovereign credit rating, it was because the French government, the prime minister, did not survive the no confidence vote. So again, they were afraid that the government will be paralyzed. So the best thing that we can do right now, it's not a sufficient condition, but it is a necessary condition, is that the political turmoil be reduced as much as possible. But the politicians do not seem to be listening.
Well, let's hope that would be resolved as soon as possible for the economy, of course. Now, let's circle back to interest rates again. Meanwhile, the Bank of Korea Governor Lee Chang-yong has released a message regarding 2025 monetary policy direction, and he mentioned that the pace of interest rate cuts would be determined flexibly this year. Professor Song, how do you expect the base interest rate to be decided at the upcoming Monetary Policy Committee meeting in 2 weeks?
Today's expression about some interest rate policy made by the chairman Lee Chang-yong. What he used the expression of the flexibility and agility. So that is a little bit nuanced. I mean that clearly in the past 2 consecutive interest rate reduction may not be enough, but today's the announcement of the economic policy made offered by the Minister of Economics Planning and Finance has been seems a little bit too strong. That's why the chairman of the Bank of Korea took the position which would be a little bit alleviate the effect of the interest rate reduction. But however, even with that, clearly I would like to mention the sentiment. Professor Yang has mentioned that the political turmoil should be some hiccup, and they are not supposed to affect export manufacturing. But however, the consumer sentiment is what I would like to mention is very important to prevail the consumer's behavior for the upcoming years. And then what matters is to make that not to be settled in the people's mind. That is important. So in the December 2024, actually, the Composite Business Sentiment Index has been dropped to 87. This is one of the lowest among the more than decades. And the 88.4 points, the Composite Consumer Sentiment and the economic sentiment index has been dropped to 83.1. In addition to these declining sentiment, consumer sentiment, the producers manufacturing index, PMI, producers management index, and that has been dropped to less than 50. And that is really bad. Even though we barely avoid the technical recession, because in the last quarter, we barely increased the growth rate by 0.1%. But I think the current situation is equivalent to some recession situation. As a result, in order to recover the sentiment to some positively and prevent the sentiment from dropping further, then we are going to fall into definitely the recession, and psychologically. So in order to avoid that, what we need right now is much stronger for the lowering interest rates, such as Jerome Powell even lower the interest rate from the 3 or 4% to 0% in the face of the coronavirus and Ukraine and the Russian war. So similar step is necessary to convince people and do not make people feel afraid of the upcoming economy at all.
So further adjustments would be necessary. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, let's shift our discussions to economic policies that will be changing from this year onward. Now, one of the most eye-catching change will be the minimum wage increase by 1.7% to 10,031 per hour. Professor Young, what is the significance of the minimum wage surpassing $10,000 mark? And what do you think about some criticisms that this is the second lowest increase ever and that it falls short of the 2.6% inflation forecast?
Okay, well, I think we do need to maybe not lower the minimum wage, but we do need to limit the increase because it has risen so much in the last 10 years. If you look at the minimum wage over the last 10 years, that's more than doubled. And I think that is showing up on the employment reports. Last year, the employment reports seemed very good with the headline figures, but if you look behind the numbers, the number of full-time jobs were reduced, and most of the job growth took place with part-time jobs, less than 36 hours per week, and most of it came in the form of social welfare work, which is mostly government financed. Now, Korean minimum wage as a percentage of per capita GDP is on the higher side of OECD countries. We are ranked 7th, but most of the countries that are ahead of Korea is Eastern European countries, and I think they set their minimum wage by the assumption that minimum wage workers do not work full-time jobs, but in Korea, minimum wage often sets the pace for full-time work. So during perhaps not this year, but during the last 10 years or so, the minimum wage has gone up very quickly, leading not only to the increases in minimum wage itself, but also wages overall. That's partially why I think young people are finding so difficulties in finding jobs when they graduate. And I think a slower pace for increase in minimum wage is warranted at this time.
Right. So about the criticisms that it's too small, the increase is too small, you're thinking that it's appropriate.
Yes. Now, the 2024 official inflation rate was 2.4%, I think, and the minimum wage right now is going up by 1.7%. So it is losing some of its purchasing power. But still, if you count things like allowances, and benefits, then I think the current minimum wage as a percentage of GDP should be adjusted somewhat. I think this right now the Korean, if you work a full-time job at a minimum wage, you're earning about 66% of per capita GDP. And I think that is creating a lot of burden for a lot of small businesses. And if you look at the employment data for small businesses, a lot of people are willing to work for less than that. They are already getting less than that amount just so that they could work and get some form of income.
All right, thank you for further explaining on that. What about Professor Song? Do you also think these kinds of concerns on employment and consumer prices would materialize? And what kind of measures do you think are necessary to mitigate these effects?
This is the point where I have quite different contrasting opinion about the minimum wage issues. Particularly, minimum wage is not for the full-time worker. I agree with Professor Yang's opinion about that. But however, what matters most in the minimum wage, the real wage is actually declining. And also, if we isolate the minimum wage as a separate issue, independent of all the other issues, then the Professor Yang's argument could be maybe right. But however, we should not do such a thing to isolate the minimum wage issue separately, independent of all other things. So considering the current economic situation, is the small and medium enterprise has been shut down, and their performance is getting worse, not because of the minimum wage, but because of the policy and the economic situation in Korea now they have went through. So considering that the minimum wage, at least as long as the small and medium enterprise, they would like to hire some people and offering such the decent wage, that is very important for the labor workers, temporary job, part-time job workers to have some meaningful and decent income for maintaining their purchasing power. So this is also for the purpose of the stabilization of economy for some lower income people. That is very important. And also this could be very beneficial to some medium and rich persons, rich companies, because they would like to spend more money. So unless they are fall into liquidity trap, then the height increase of the minimum wage could be positive to the economic recovery.
All right. It's always good to hear both sides of your opinion. It has been a very fruitful discussion today. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it today right here. Many thanks for your insights, Professor Yang and Professor Song. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.